Hi there, it's Kristen from k.becca, and today we'll be making a modern thank you card where the Ranger Transparent Gloss Texture Paste is the star of the show. This texture paste has been around for a couple of years, but I only picked some up for the first time recently and think it's a pretty cool product. If you're not familiar with texture paste, it's available from a number of different companies and in a wide variety of different options. This particular paste dries to a transparent gloss finish, but there are also opaque texture pastes, translucent texture pastes, glitter texture pastes, you name it, and they all help you add dimensional texture to your papercraft projects. One of the great things about most texture paste is that you can add your own custom color to it, so you can create colors to coordinate with whatever project you're making, or colors that you can mix and blend together, like I'm going to do in this project. I'll be coloring my texture paste with Distress ink, and the colors that I'm using are picked raspberry, candied apple, carved pumpkin, and mustard seed. To color my texture paste, I'll smush some of the ink from the ink pad onto my work surface, and I'm using a silicone mat so I can easily clean it off when I'm done. You can also use an acrylic block, and pallet paper works too. After I have a good bit of ink on my mat, I'll add the texture paste to it with an offset palette knife. You can see when I open the jar of texture paste that it has the consistency of sort of a buttercream frosting. This particular paste is just slightly thinner than some of the other texture pastes that I've tried, but it's still really creamy and easy to work with. Okay, so I have maybe about a teaspoon of texture paste on the bottom of my palette knife, and I'm going to add that to the ink and mix them together. Sometimes the ink likes to hide out under the paste on the mat, so every now and then I'll scrape my palette knife on the mat to bring that ink up and into the texture paste. Once the ink is pretty evenly incorporated throughout the texture paste, I'll scrape it together and load it up on the bottom side of my palette knife. Then I'll quickly swipe it across the top of my card front, which has been cut from Bristol Smooth mixed media paper. You can swipe the palette knife with the texture paste across your paper as many times as needed to get the coverage that you want. I only need it a few times for the first color, but you'll see that I make more passes with the palette knife with some of the colors later on. After I'm finished with the first color, which is the picked raspberry, I'll wipe off my palette knife using a paper towel and then mix the next texture paste color, which is candied apple. I'll go through the same process that I did with the first color, smushing the ink onto my work surface and mixing in about a teaspoon of paste. If you want to add more color to the texture paste as you're working, you can smush additional ink beside the area where the paste is and then work that into the mix. Keep in mind that the colors will intensify a little bit as the paste dries and goes from opaque to transparent. When I'm finished working in that additional ink, I'll load up the underside of my palette knife again and swipe it across the paper just like I did with the first color. I want to make sure that part of this color is overlapping the first color so the two colors will mix in the overlapping area and create a third color. This is one of my favorite parts of doing projects like this. I love to see the colors that are created in those overlapping areas. When I'm finished with the second color, I'll use a dry paper towel to wipe up any excess from my craft mat before the paste starts to dry too much. After that, I'll smush some carved pumpkin ink onto my work surface and will repeat the mixing process just like I did with the first two colors. Then I'll load up the underside of the palette knife and swipe it across the paper, overlapping it with the candied apple colored area. Then I'll mix the fourth and last color, which is mustard seed, and I'll add that right at the bottom of the paper, overlapping and mixing it with the carved pumpkin and some of the candied apple area as well. When I'm finished with the texture paste, I'll use a paper towel to wipe up any excess, and then I'll clean my work area more completely. This texture paste cleans up pretty easily with a little soap and warm water, and you can clean up any bits that are tougher to remove with a cotton ball soaked in rubbing alcohol if needed. Now, the card panel with the texture paste needs to dry completely. I like to leave it for at least 3 or 4 hours, but overnight is even better, especially if your texture paste is applied in thicker layers. I left mine to dry overnight. Okay, so it's the next day and the texture paste is completely dry. You can see that it's transparent and glossy and that the colors, especially the mustard seed, have intensified. I really like how the colors mixed in some of those overlapping areas too. So I thought about trimming down this piece for the final card, but I was really happy with how it turned out, so I decided to keep it the full A2 size and make it the centerpiece of the design. To finish the card, I added double-sided adhesive to the back of the card panel and adhered it to a top-folding A2 size card base. Then I die cut this thanks sentiment from white cardstock using a silhouette cameo and dotted Ranger Multi-Medium Matte adhesive around the back of the die cut before adhering it at the bottom right of the card. When I adhered the die cut to the card, I left just a little bit of the end of the letter S hanging over the edge of the card, and I'll cut that little piece of overhang off with craft scissors so the word looks like it's running right off of the edge of the card. And after that, this card is finished. You can find a full list of supplies used in this project in the description area below, or in the area below the video if you're watching on k.becca.com. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more handmade card projects, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in again soon.